He was a billionaire, a man who had everything in his hands, yet he could not escape an old wound. Years ago, his fiancée had left David Harrison with a cold email of only 3 sentences, and now, right there on his desk, lay a golden envelope. Inside, the wedding invitation of that very woman. David sat in silence in his high-rise office in Chicago. The echoes of a billion-dollar deal still filled the financial news, but his hand trembled as it hovered over the gilded words. All the fame, all the money, suddenly meaningless, because some wounds never sleep. He turned toward the window. The city glittered below, alive with light. But inside, there was only emptiness. The woman who once promised forever now walked toward another man with a wedding grander than any contract David had ever signed. There are pains that money cannot buy away. There are memories that no fortune can erase. And in this very moment, a story began. One that would shake all of Chicago. If you have ever carried a heartbreak, stay with us, for this story will make your heart ache, and also begin to heal. The envelope lay heavy on his desk. Cream paper, thick, embossed in gold. The kind of stationery that whispered wealth and whispered arrogance. Even the faint perfume clinging to it felt deliberate. Catherine's mark. David turned it over slowly. The edges pressed against his palm. It felt less like an invitation and more like a wound wrapped in silk. His eyes caught the gleam of his own reflection in the window, a man who had everything yet still managed to lose the only thing that mattered. He let out a laugh, low and bitter. A billionaire with empty hands, he thought. I can buy half the city, but I cannot buy her promise back. The words inside the envelope mocked him. Elegant calligraphy. Every line dripping with celebration. You are cordially invited. Cordially, as if the past could be swept away with ink and perfume. The city lights below blinked like jewels. But to David, they were cold, distant stars. Money, power, contracts, none of it shielded him from the ache that tightened in his chest. The envelope remained open, a reminder. He had everything, yet somehow he had nothing. Memory slipped in before he could stop it. Catherine's voice, light as champagne. The way her laughter once filled his penthouse halls, the sudden silence that followed, sharp as broken glass. She had vanished without warning. No fight, no farewell, just that single email, 3 short sentences, cold, final. I cannot explain. It is better for us both. I wish you the best. For years, David tried to bury that night. He poured himself into deals, into the kind of victories that made headlines. He built towers of glass and steel, a fortress against loneliness. Chicago spoke his name with awe. He became the man who always won, but every victory carried the shadow of her absence. Behind the flash of cameras, behind the contracts signed with golden pens, there was an emptiness no applause could fill. Catherine's silence had shaped him more than any fortune. The memory gnawed at him as he read her wedding date, a date she had chosen to celebrate her new beginning. For David, it felt like a cruel reminder that his story with her had never ended. It simply lingered, waiting. And now it demanded his attention again. He almost threw it away. The envelope, the invitation, the insult. The wastebasket beside his desk seemed the perfect grave. One flick of his hand, and the past would be gone. But his hand did not move. Pride rooted him in place. Dignity whispered that ignoring her would be noble. Yet something darker whispered louder. Go. Let her see you. Let her remember what she left behind. David's jaw tightened. He had spent years building an empire, not for revenge, but for control. Still, the thought of a Catherine walking down the aisle with Richard Collins, her new prize, felt unbearable. To stay home would be surrender. To appear would be a statement. And he knew one thing about himself. He did not live quietly. But this would not be enough. He could not walk in alone, another guest lost in the crowd. No, he needed someone by his side, someone unexpected, someone who would turn heads the second she entered. The thought simmered, reckless and sharp. If he must face Catherine again, then he would not simply attend her wedding. He would change the entire room by the company he kept. 2 mornings later, the answer found him. Not in a boardroom, not in a gala, but in a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop. David had just taken his coffee when the door swung open. A woman hurried in, cheeks flushed from the cold wind. She wore a mustard-yellow scarf and carried a bag stuffed with sketchbooks. The moment happened fast. He reached for his cup at the same instant she reached for napkins. Coffee tipped, dark liquid spilling across her scarf. "Oh no, I'm so sorry." she said, dabbing at the stain. Her voice was warm, steady, not apologetic in the way people usually were around him. David shook his head, amused despite himself. "It's my fault. I should have been watching." She looked up, eyes deep brown, alive, a presence that filled the space without effort. "You're David Harrison," she said, recognizing him. Then she smiled. "Didn't expect you to be a coffee spiller." He laughed, genuinely. It had been a long time since someone spoke to him without pretense. She was Monica Brooks, a freelance illustrator. Ordinary, yet unforgettable. And as she walked toward the door, something inside him whispered, "Ask her." She was almost at the door when his voice stopped her. "Monica!" David called. She turned, eyebrow raised. "This will sound insane," he said, steady but reckless. "I need a date, to a wedding." Her laugh came quick, surprised. "Excuse me? You don't even know me." "That's the point," he replied. His tone had the same weight that once closed billion-dollar deals. Her eyes widened. "Wait, you're serious? You're asking a stranger to play arm candy at your ex's wedding?" "Not arm candy," David said. "A statement. I want someone unexpected, someone who doesn't fit their world." She shook her head, still smiling. "This sounds like the plot of a terrible rom-com." "Terrible," he admitted, "but with better wardrobe." The silence stretched. Monica studied him. He was dangerous, maybe ridiculous, but part of her felt curious. Finally, she tilted her head. "All right, but only if I set the rules." Something shifted in David's chest. Against all reason, she had not walked away. She had stepped closer, turning his reckless thought into reality. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held mischief. "3 rules," Monica said. David leaned in, curious. "1," she began, "I am not your girlfriend. Don't act like I am. I'll play the role, but I won't pretend to be yours." David nodded. "Fair enough." 2, I pick what I wear. No stylists, no million-dollar gowns you think will fix me. I show up as myself." His lips twitched. "I wouldn't dream of changing you." 3, she said slowly, "I get to have fun. My way." David raised an eyebrow. "Define fun." "You'll see," Monica answered, her grin deliberate. For a moment he considered challenging her, reminding her who usually set the terms. But something about her tone, her confidence made him pause. She wasn't intimidated by him. She wasn't even impressed. "Deal," he said finally. They shook on it. Her hand was warm, firm, steady. He felt a spark he hadn't felt in years. As Monica left the cafe, scarf still stained, David realized something. This wasn't just a stunt anymore. It was the beginning of a game he no longer fully controlled. The next morning, a car pulled up outside Monica's apartment. The driver handed her an envelope, heavy and ornate. Inside was the wedding invitation. Waldorf Astoria, Chicago. Gold lettering. A stage set for power and prestige. She laughed at the absurdity. Her? In that ballroom, surrounded by chandeliers and diamonds? Then her laughter faded. It was happening. She had agreed. For David, it was strategy. For her, it was risk. Stepping into his world meant stepping into a cage lined with velvet and steel. The thought tightened her chest, but she squared her shoulders. She placed the invitation on her small kitchen table. Around it were sketches, coffee stains, overdue bills. Her real life. That envelope looked like it belonged to another planet. And yet she felt a flicker of fire. Maybe she didn't belong. Or maybe that was exactly why she should go. As she tied her hair back, she whispered, "You wanted fun, Monica. Well, this is it." The battle wasn't hers to start, but once inside that hotel, she knew she would not simply fade into the background. A few nights later, they met again. This time at a quiet steakhouse, dark wood and low lights. Not a date, Monica reminded herself. A rehearsal. David leaned back, casual but focused. "We met at an art gallery in Soho," he began. She shook her head immediately. "No, that's fake. We tell the truth. You spilled coffee on me. It's messy, it's funny, and it makes you human." He blinked, then chuckled. "And what do I usually seem like?" "A man who says synergy without irony," she teased. He laughed, a real laugh, rare and unguarded. He scribbled notes like a student taking instructions. Monica had a knack for details. She asked about their first movie, their inside jokes, the little threads that made a story believable. For every smooth answer he gave, she twisted it into something more real, less polished. She wasn't just agreeing to attend. She was shaping the narrative. By dessert, David realized something unsettling. He was used to orchestrating every move, every word. But here, she was the one steering. And, strangely, he didn't mind. The night before the wedding, Monica stood in front of her mirror. 2 dresses lay across the bed. The first was black. Simple. Elegant. Safe. It would let her blend in, avoid stares, survive the evening unnoticed. The second was emerald green. Bold. Daring. The kind of dress that caught light and refused to let go. It would not whisper. It would command. She held the black gown up first. Her reflection looked polite, almost invisible. Then she slipped the emerald fabric across her shoulders. The mirror changed. She changed. Her lips curved. David wanted a statement. She would give him one. She set the black dress aside, folding it neatly as if closing a chapter. The green gown stayed, draped across the chair like a challenge. That night, as she slid under the covers, her heart raced. Tomorrow, she would walk into a room built for people like Catherine and Richard. And she, Monica Brooks, the girl with unpaid invoices and a stained scarf, would stand beside a billionaire. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Let them stare." The morning of the wedding arrived. A Bentley waited outside Monica's building, polished to a mirror shine. David stepped out first. Midnight blue tuxedo. Every line sharp, every detail exact. He looked like control in human form. Monica appeared a moment later. Emerald gown flowing, catching the light as though the fabric itself was alive. For a second, even David forgot to breathe. "You look," he began, then stopped. Words seemed too small. She twirled once, playful but proud. "Different from your usual crowd?" "Better," he answered simply. His voice carried no performance. She smiled, slipped her hand into his offered arm, and together they moved toward the car. The city hummed outside, but inside the Bentley the air thickened. Monica pulled out her phone. "One last thing," she said, typing fast. "What's that?" David asked. "Letting my friends know I'm about to crash Chicago's fanciest wedding with a billionaire I barely know. They want pictures." David shook his head, almost amused. "You really are going to enjoy this." She leaned back against the leather seat. "You have no idea." The car rolled forward, carrying them straight into a storm neither of them could yet imagine. The Waldorf Astoria shimmered like a palace. Chandeliers spilled gold across marble floors. A string quartet floated notes that seemed too delicate for air. The doors to the grand ballroom opened. David Harrison entered first, tall, composed, every inch the man who belonged. Eyes turned to him, then stopped, shifted, and stayed, because on his arm was Monica Brooks. Her emerald gown swept behind her like a trail of fire. Skin glowing, posture steady, eyes calm. She didn't force attention. She absorbed it, made it inevitable. Whispers raced through the crowd. "Who is she?" "Not his type." "She's stunning." Monica held her head high, neither hurried nor hesitant. She walked as if the floor itself welcomed her steps. David felt the weight of stares, but for the first time it wasn't on him. Monica was the focus, the disruption, the spark in a room built on routine elegance. He glanced sideways. She whispered without looking at him, "Smile, not with your mouth, with your ego. Make them wonder." His lips almost curved. For a fleeting second, admiration flickered in his eyes. The statement had been made, and the night had only begun. They moved deeper into the ballroom. Champagne glasses clinked. Diamonds glittered. But the undercurrent was questions. "She doesn't look like a socialite. Is she an actress? Maybe she's his secret." Every glance carried judgment. Every whisper sharpened curiosity. Monica heard it, felt it, but didn't flinch. She met eyes with strangers, offered a polite smile, and let the silence after linger. Each unanswered question only deepened her mystery. A tall man intercepted them near the champagne table. "David, I didn't expect to see you here." His gaze slid to Monica. "And you've brought company." "Charles Ellison," David introduced smoothly. "This is Monica Brooks." Charles extended his hand, searching her face for a clue. Monica's handshake was firm, her smile soft but unreadable. "Lovely to meet you." Then she said nothing more. The silence stretched until Charles withdrew awkwardly. They continued walking. Monica leaned closer, voice low. "People are trying to place me, but they won't. That bothers them." David studied her. "You sound like you've done this before." She smirked. "No, I just know how to be myself. That seems to work." And tonight, it worked better than either of them expected. A shift rippled through the room. Monica didn't need to turn to know why. Catherine Whitmore had arrived. She was radiant in champagne silk, her smile the practiced kind that belonged on society covers. Her hand rested on Richard Collins's arm, steady, polished, perfect. But when her eyes landed on David and the woman beside him, the smile faltered. Only for a breath, but enough for Monica to notice. They crossed paths near the edge of the dance floor. Catherine's voice was smooth, every syllable controlled. "David, how wonderful to see you." "You did send me an invitation," David replied, calm but pointed. "I'd hate to disappoint." Her gaze flicked to Monica. "And who is this?" David didn't hesitate. "This is Monica Brooks, my date." Monica extended her hand. "Congratulations. This place is stunning." Catherine took the hand. Her smile sharpened, delicate but edged. "Thank you. We spared no expense." Monica's expression didn't waver. "It shows." For a moment, nothing else moved. The quartet played. Guests laughed across the room. But between these three, the air thickened. It was a battle disguised as pleasantries, and Catherine's mask had already cracked. Dinner was called. A long glittering table stretched across the ballroom, lined with silver and crystal. David and Monica took their seats. Across the room, Catherine watched, posture flawless but eyes restless. Monica spoke little, yet every word carried weight. She laughed at David's driest jokes. She listened carefully to others. She answered questions with warmth, but never too much detail. The mystery remained intact. Guests leaned in closer, drawn to her presence. Men studied her, intrigued. Women observed her, searching for flaws. David noticed the subtle shift. Normally, he was the magnet. Tonight, Monica was, and she wasn't even trying. Catherine's fingers tightened around her glass. To her guests, she smiled. To herself, she fumed. Monica wasn't a distraction. She was a rival. David glanced at Monica, sensing the tension. She met his eyes briefly, calm, as if to say, "I know what I'm doing." Catherine forced a laugh at a guest's remark, but her gaze kept darting back. Every effortless gesture from Monica chipped away at her control. At that table, power was no longer measured by wealth or pedigree. It was measured by presence. And Monica Brooks had just claimed hers. The music shifted. A waltz, gentle, steady. Couples rose from their seats and drifted toward the dance floor. David stood, offering his hand. Monica accepted, emerald fabric sweeping behind her as they moved to the center. Their steps were natural, unrehearsed yet in sync, as if they had practiced 100 times. He led without force. She followed without effort. Together, they looked less like strangers and more like partners. The room noticed. Conversations softened. Heads turned. At the far end of the table, Catherine watched. Her smile stayed, but her chest tightened. The sight of David holding another woman with such ease cut sharper than she expected. Richard leaned toward her, whispering something polite, but Catherine barely heard. Her eyes remained locked on the floor where David's hand rested lightly against Monica's back. It wasn't scandal. It wasn't even intimate. But it was something worse. It was effortless. Monica's laughter floated above the music. David's mouth curved in reply. They spun once, graceful, radiant under the chandeliers. Catherine's fingers dug into her glass stem. For the first time that evening, she felt her control slipping, and she hated how much it mattered. As the dance ended, guests returned to their seats. Waiters refilled glasses. The quartet softened. The master of ceremonies tapped a spoon against crystal. "It's time for toasts." One by one, friends of the bride and groom stood. The maid of honor first, voice trembling with joy. A story of childhood sleepovers, whispered secrets, forever promises. Applause followed. Then the best man rose. Humor layered over sentiment. He spoke of college memories, late-night mischief, loyalty that lasted decades. More applause, polite and expected. Each toast glittered on the surface, polished and safe. Words chosen carefully, as if rehearsed for the press. Compliments wrapped in ribbons. Monica sat quiet, hands folded around her glass. She listened, eyes steady. She smiled when the crowd laughed. She nodded when tears shimmered in the bride's eyes. But inside, she waited. She wasn't part of this circle. She had no stories of summers in Nantucket, no memories of galas or operas. She was the outsider, invisible by design. Yet, as the speeches faded, a pause lingered. The room expected the next voice. None came. Silence stretched, and Monica felt something stir inside her, an urge, a spark, a decision forming in the quiet. The silence deepened. Guests shifted, glancing around. That was when Monica rose. Chairs creaked. Eyes snapped toward her. A woman no one knew, standing tall, glass in hand. David's brow lifted, surprise flickering. Catherine's smile stiffened. Monica cleared her throat lightly. "Since I'm apparently the only one here who doesn't know the bride and groom personally," she began, "I thought I'd offer the perspective of a complete outsider." A ripple of laughter moved through the tables, some amused, some confused. She let them wait. Then her lips curved. "I met David because he spilled coffee on me. Twice." The room chuckled, unexpected and genuine. Even David allowed a faint smile. Monica lifted her glass a little higher. Most people would call that a warning sign, but sometimes the people who stumble into your life, literally, turn out to show you something you didn't know you needed. The laughter softened into stillness. Her voice, steady and warm, held the room. No one had expected her to speak. Fewer still had expected her to disarm them with humor. But now, every face leaned in, waiting, and Monica, calm as ever, knew she had their full attention. She let the silence breathe before continuing. Her gaze swept the room, steady, unhurried. "I don't know Catherine. I don't know Richard. But I do know what it feels like to watch someone you once cared for choose a different path. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it hurts. And sometimes—" She paused, her eyes brushing across Catherine's for a fraction of a second. "Sometimes it teaches you who you really are, and what you'll never settle for again." Cutlery stilled. Conversations died. Even the quartet seemed to play softer. Monica's voice lowered, rich with conviction. "The real mark of love isn't how perfect it looks tonight. It's what happens when the music stops, when the guests go home, when it's just the two of you. If you can still look at each other then, and laugh, and choose each other again, that's winning." Her words hung in the air. A simple truth, stripped bare of decoration. Across the room, Catherine's smile stayed frozen. David's eyes, however, held something new. Not calculation, not pride, but admiration. Monica raised her glass, steady. "So, here's to the moments that test us, the choices that define us, and the courage to stand exactly where you want to be." Applause started slow, scattered, then built, wave by wave, until the room buzzed with uneasy approval. Monica lowered her glass. She could have sat down, but instead she delivered one last strike. "And here's to unexpected company," she added, her eyes finding Catherine's. "The kind that walks into a room and reminds everyone that life doesn't always follow the guest list." The words landed like stone on glass. A hush rippled through the tables. Some guests exchanged startled glances. Others smirked, entertained. David remained silent, jaw tight. Catherine's shoulders stiffened, her practiced composure cracking just enough for Monica to see. Richard shifted in his chair, unease flickering in his eyes. Monica's face remained calm, her smile faint but deliberate. She set her glass down and returned to her seat as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But the shift was undeniable. The night no longer belonged to the bride and groom. It belonged to the woman no one expected. Guests whispered again, not with idle curiosity this time, but with something sharper. And as Monica sat, her pulse steady, she knew the ripple she had started would not fade. It would grow. It already had. Applause rose in uneven waves. At first, hesitant claps, then stronger, steadier, until the sound filled the ballroom. Monica sat calmly, hands folded in her lap, as if she hadn't just shaken the entire evening. David leaned back, eyes fixed on her, a flicker of pride hidden beneath his composed face. Across the table, Catherine's smile stayed glued in place. Perfect for the cameras, perfect for the guests, but her eyes betrayed her. Wide, restless. The applause didn't sound like celebration. To her, it sounded like judgment. Richard placed a hand over hers, steadying. She pulled it back too quickly. He noticed. So did others. The guests continued murmuring, their glances drifting again and again toward the woman in green. Not the bride, not the groom. Monica Brooks. Catherine raised her glass, forced a laugh, tried to reclaim the mood. But it was too late. The shift had happened. She was no longer the center of her own wedding. And the look in her eyes, tight, fearful, said she knew it. When the applause faded, Richard Collins studied Monica. At first it was simple curiosity. Who was she? Why had David brought her? But then his expression changed. A flicker of recognition. His jaw tightened. A memory pressed forward. Philadelphia. A mural project on 7th Street. a young artist with dark eyes and a sharp voice. She had painted with conviction, and he had paid her half of what she was owed. When she demanded the rest, he had suggested another kind of arrangement. She had refused, fiercely, publicly, and he never forgot. Now, years later, she stood across from him, radiant, confident, and untouchable. Richard's pulse quickened. Did she remember him? Did David know? He glanced at Catherine, still preoccupied with jealousy. She had no idea, at least not yet, but Monica knew. He could see it in her posture, calm but alert. The same eyes that once glared at him in defiance now sparkled with quiet fire. He shifted in his seat, suddenly uncomfortable in his own wedding. For the first time that night, Richard realized he was not the host. He was vulnerable, and Monica Brooks was the reason. Later, near the edge of the dance floor, Richard stepped close, his smile polished, his tone low. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again," he murmured. Monica turned, meeting his gaze without flinching. "You're mistaken." "No," Richard said, leaning in. "Philadelphia, 7th Street. That mural. You were a college kid, talented and stubborn." Her voice dropped, steady as stone. "Some things are unforgettable." Richard's grin faltered. "I was generous. You misread." "Generous?" She cut him off, sharp. "You paid half, and tried to take more than you were ever owed." His mask slipped, but only for a second. David appeared, hand at Monica's elbow, his voice calm, polite. "Everything all right here?" Richard stepped back half an inch, his smile snapping back into place. "Of course. Just catching up with an old acquaintance." Monica's gaze stayed fixed. "Not that old," she replied. "Some memories stay fresh forever." David's hand lingered, protective. Richard's smile cooled. The music swelled again, but the air between them remained heavy. Three people knew the truth now, and that truth was more dangerous than any secret whispered in a ballroom. Catherine watched from across the room. Her posture was poised, her smile flawless, but her eyes sharpened. She had seen the exchange. Richard leaning in too close, Monica's reply short and cutting, David stepping between them like a shield. Something was there, something unsaid. She gripped the edge of her chair, her knuckles whitening beneath the silk gloves. For hours she had fought against jealousy, irritation, humiliation, but now a new sensation crept in. Fear. What secret tied her husband to this woman? And why had David chosen her, of all people, to stand at his side tonight? The wedding should have been hers, her perfect stage. But now the edges of that stage trembled. The lights no longer belonged to her. She forced another smile, laughed at another guest's story. But her eyes never left Monica, and each time their gazes met, Catherine felt it. That silent threat, that unshakable truth. Monica Brooks was not just an inconvenience. She was a danger. And danger, Catherine knew, could destroy everything. The reception carried on. Music played, glasses clinked, guests danced, laughed, toasted. But the center of gravity had shifted. Wherever Monica went, eyes followed. Guests approached her, curious, drawn in. She answered with grace, never too much, never too little. A mystery they couldn't resist. David noticed. He had expected her to play a part, to follow his lead. Instead, she commanded the room, and she did it without effort, without calculation. He found himself watching her more than the bride, more than the groom. Admiration stirred, unexpected, undeniable. For years, David had believed power meant control. Tonight, he saw something different. Power could also mean presence, and Monica had it. At the head table, Catherine sipped her champagne too quickly. Her mask cracked more with each glance. Richard avoided Monica's eyes entirely. Monica, meanwhile, carried herself as if she belonged, not as decoration, not as distraction, but as herself. The night was meant to showcase Catherine and Richard. Yet, as the hours passed, it became clear. This story no longer revolved around them. It revolved around the woman no one invited. And David Harrison, for the first time in years, was glad to be surprised. The Bentley eased away from the Waldorf Astoria. Outside, Chicago glittered, but inside the car the air was still. David broke the silence first, his voice low. "That toast you gave? Who was it for?" Monica turned toward the window, then back to him. "For both," she said quietly. "For the one who thought he was untouchable, and for the one who forgot the past has a way of showing up." Her words hung in the dark, dual edges, cutting in two directions. David studied her face, searching for more, but she offered nothing else, just calm, just truth. He leaned back, letting the city lights streak across his reflection. It was rare for anyone to speak to him without filter, without fear, yet Monica had done it, in front of hundreds. For the first time, he wasn't sure if he had used her for his statement, or if she had used him for hers. Either way, he realized something unsettling. He didn't regret it. By morning, the storm had broken. Headlines sprawled across screens. Mystery woman steals show at society wedding. Who is David Harrison's date? The wild card in green. Photos flooded the internet. Monica in emerald, glass raised mid-toast. Video clips of her speech, her laugh, her dance with David. Even close-ups of Catherine's faltering smile. Social media buzzed. Some praised her as magnetic, fearless. Others whispered she was a gold digger. Speculation mixed with fascination, and her name spread faster than she could silence her phone. Her inbox filled with messages. Old friends, strangers, reporters, all demanding answers. Even her aunt in Georgia left a panicked voicemail. "Baby, you're on the news. Call me before I faint." Monica buried her phone under a pillow, but the vibration never stopped. She wasn't used to being watched. Now every part of her life was on display. David, meanwhile, read the coverage in silence. This had been meant as a personal strike, a private victory. Instead, it had turned into spectacle. Yet, when he saw her name, Monica Brooks, across every headline, he felt no regret. Only curiosity. By evening, Monica couldn't stand it. She called him, frustration sharp in her voice. "Tell me this dies down tomorrow," she demanded. David's laugh was quiet. "If I had that kind of control, half the press would be out of business." "I didn't sign up for this, David. I didn't sign up to have my life ripped apart. You signed up for a wedding. The rest was collateral." "Collateral?" she snapped. "Do I look like property damage to you?" His tone softened. "I didn't mean it that way. Look, there's a way forward. We can get ahead of this. Spin the story. Control the narrative." "I'm not your PR stunt," Monica shot back. There was silence, then his voice, lower. "It's not about that anymore. I don't like the idea of you being torn apart by people who don't even know you, and maybe I like the idea of keeping you around a little longer." Her breath caught, just for a second. She hated that his words warmed something inside her. A week later, Monica arrived at Grant Tower. David had asked her to dinner. No reporters, no cameras, just them. Halfway through dessert, he set down his glass. "I want to hire you," he said. She blinked. "As what? Your fake date? Your shield?" "No," he answered. "As curator. I'm opening a gallery. I have the money and the space. I don't have the eye. You do." Monica stared at him, unsure if he was serious. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," David said. "You see what others miss, and you don't back down. I want that in the gallery." For a moment she let herself imagine it. Light-filled rooms. Canvases alive again. Not surviving, but creating. Not invisible, but seen. Her chest tightened. This wasn't about him. This was about her, about finally stepping into her own space. She nodded slowly. "I'll do it. But not for you. For me." His smile was slow, genuine. "Fair enough." For the first time, she wasn't the pawn. She wasn't even the queen. She was her own player. The evening closed with Monica waiting at the elevator, her coat resting lightly across her arm. David walked her there, slower than usual, as though buying time he couldn't admit he wanted. "This isn't the end," he said, voice quieter than the city humming below. Monica's smile was soft, steady. "No," she replied, "it's just the beginning." The doors slid shut, carrying her upward, leaving David behind. He stood still for a long moment, hands in his pockets, uncharacteristically uncertain. For once, control wasn't in his grip. And, strangely, he didn't mind. By morning, the headlines had changed again. Not about the bride, not about the billionaire, but about her, the wild card. The woman in green who had walked into a wedding, turned the night on its head, and walked away owning the story. For Monica, it was never about fame. It was about choice. About daring to step where she didn't belong and discovering she belonged all along. For David, it was something else. It was the rarest thing of all, a reason to wait. And, for anyone listening, it was a reminder. You can lose money, you can lose status, but if you choose truth and love, you will never lose yourself.